Hey everyone, welcome to Turkish Spotlight Secrets. All the layers of tonight's story are right here, so settle in, hit subscribe, and share this video if you love being the first to know what's really happening behind the velvet ropes. Now, let's talk about the encounter everyone is whispering about. Çağatay Ulusoy, one of the most sought-after leading men of his generation, and his former partner Hazal stepped into the same room for the first time in ages, and the air in that room shifted. It wasn't planned, it wasn't staged, and judging by the look on several faces, it certainly wasn't expected. The sighting happened at a late-night private event in Istanbul, a sleek brand launch that drew a carefully curated guest list. What no one saw coming was that these two would cross paths again, sending a wave of curiosity through social media like fire on dry grass. It all began with a small moment that grew into the talk of the night. The two arrived separately and quietly, each focused on mingling and keeping it understated. But when he spotted her, the shift was visible even from across the room. Word spread in minutes. Çağatay could barely pull his gaze away from Hazal. Their love story, once the golden tale of the set that became real life, had faded out last year with a silence that spoke more than any statement. They gave no interviews about their breakup, kept a respectful distance, and carried on with work that kept their names near each other even when their lives were no longer intertwined. Yet that night, a single glance brought everything back to the surface for those who remember them as the couple everyone rooted for. A guest who witnessed the moment painted a vivid scene afterward. They said both of them walked in with a calm that matched the room's cool music and muted lights. But as soon as their eyes met, something flickered that drew attention without a word. He froze, just for a breath, the guest shared. He looked at her like he was recognizing a feeling he thought he'd put away. He didn't stop watching her. It wasn't intrusive, it wasn't awkward, but it was clear. And Hazal, she was the definition of grace. She didn't change her pace, didn't look rattled. She smiled politely and carried on like the consummate professional she's always been. As soon as that quote began circulating among attendees and then online, the speculation machine roared to life, each new voice adding another layer to the story of a glance that wouldn't let go. The photos that surfaced soon after did nothing to calm the buzz. They weren't together in any frame, yet the cameras, guided by instinct and luck, captured the subtle tells that make 1,000 words feel too small. In one shot, Hazal stood with a serene smile, speaking to a friend, her chin lifted just slightly, her posture confident and unhurried. In another, Çağatay stood by the edge of the crowd, his eyes distant, then shifting toward the corner she occupied, the expression on his face difficult to name but impossible to ignore. When those images hit the feeds, comments fell like rain. Some wrote, "The romance ended, but that look didn't," while others countered, "They're two seasoned pros sharing a room. It's normal. Let them breathe." And still, the debate continued, because a story like theirs doesn't slip from memory, it waits, like a melody that lingers after the song ends. Hazal, for her part, had the room spellbound from the moment she stepped in. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored black dress, nothing loud, nothing embellished, but every line of it perfectly in harmony with the way she carried herself. Her makeup was soft, letting her features do the talking. She moved with the calm assurance of a woman who knows the flashbulbs will find her and doesn't need to chase them. She didn't give interviews, didn't linger in front of cameras longer than she had to, and yet the warmth in her smile told a story of someone at peace with the room and her place in it. People turned to look at her not because she demanded it, but because the glow of her presence was impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, there was a different kind of energy around Çağatay. He walked in with a classic silhouette, tailored suit, sharp lines, a detail here and there that hinted at quiet boldness. But as the evening wore on, the polish gave way to something less easily defined. He seemed thoughtful, as if the conversations he was having were just the surface of what was actually running through his mind. From time to time he glanced around, not restless, but searching, and there was a hush in his focus whenever his eyes drifted toward the same corner, the one where Hazal stood. Those who have watched him closely on set recognized the intensity. It's the same depth he brings to scenes that call for a truth you can't fake. And then came the question no one could resist, is something old beginning to spark again? The quiet between them only made the curiosity grow. neither said a word publicly. No posts, no stories, no quoted lines from cryptic captions. That silence, as always, worked like fuel. Fans began threading timelines, placing photos side by side, finding echoes of past moments in the expressions of this new night. Some swore they saw the start of a new chapter building itself in that room. Others said the opposite, that the very composure of the evening marked an ending well and truly accepted. The truth? Only they know. But the tension, the beautiful, aching tension of what if, turned that launch into the scene everyone would be replaying in their heads for days. It's impossible to remember this pair without recalling where it began for the public, the days of a Dini Ferry Hakoitum, when their on-screen chemistry sparked a wave that spilled into life off-camera. For a long time, they were that rare couple who felt like the perfect alignment of story and reality. When it ended last year, it was with a grace that surprised even those who follow these narratives closely. There were no storms in the press, no barbed comments, no sudden unfollows. Just a quiet acknowledgement that they were stepping into separate paths. Even then, their fans kept the flame alive, waiting for a chance sighting, a shared project, a sign the tide could turn again. This event, more than any rumor or contrived headline, offered the kind of unscripted moment that sends the conversation spinning in unpredictable ways. The location was a favorite of Istanbul's scene makers, all mirrored walls, low conversation, and playlists designed to keep hearts beating just a bit faster than usual. The brand behind the night is known for pairing classic elegance with a modern edge, in other words, exactly the kind of stage on which you could imagine these two meeting again without meaning to. They arrived in silence. They did not greet publicly. They did not pose. But they were there, and everyone could feel the story unspool even while it held itself together in the exacting manners of professionalism. There was a moment, just after midnight, when the room seemed to quiet for no particular reason, the way rooms sometimes do. It coincided, according to several attendees, with the second time their eyes met. It wasn't dramatic. No one knocked over a glass. No one rushed to intervene. But it carried the soft gravity of a memory. He paused, almost imperceptibly. She offered a serene, almost private smile to the person standing beside her. The music pressed on, the guests kept moving, and yet for those who were paying attention, that instant felt like a page being turned, whether toward an epilogue or a prologue no one can yet say. In a corner near the entryway, a photographer lifted the camera just as Çağatay looked to his left, not quite at her but close enough for the lens to capture a mixture of introspection and something more tender. That image moved fast. It sparked a rush of comments that split the timeline in two moods. On one side came the romantics, "You can't fake that kind of look," they said. On the other, the pragmatists, their colleagues with history. That's all. The thread grew long, with people recalling scenes from years ago, interviews where they laughed at questions, and the mystique that follows two people who once shared a private world and now share only rooms that belong to everyone else. Even the behind-the-scenes whispers seemed torn between longing and closure. Some murmured that his attention meant a door was still open. Others insisted the night's restraint proved that chapter had closed gently, with respect, and would remain a memory rather than a plan. Curiously, both readings fit the night, which managed to carry two truths in the same space, the undeniable past they shared and the possibility that past has become simply that, a piece of time they can look at with clear eyes. If you stood near Hazal for even a few minutes, you felt what drew so many to her in the first place. She radiated calm, not the kind that comes from indifference, but the kind born of deep steadiness. Her presence was light without being fragile, understated and luminous at once. She moved through the reception with uncomplicated grace, thanking hosts, greeting friends, stepping away from cameras without the slightest edge to her refusal. It was elegant. It was intentional. And it reminded everyone how she became a touchstone for a generation that admires both her talent and her refusal to be anything other than herself. If you observed Çağatay closely, you saw a man in control of every ritual of the night, yet occasionally distracted by a thought only he seemed to hear. He laughed at the right moments, gave that subtle head tilt that signals he's listening, and made time for a handful of conversations that drifted toward upcoming roles and evolving tastes. But then there were the intervals where his focus turned inward, where the music seemed to fade and he stood at the edge of the room not as a star but as a person considering a memory. It didn't make him look weak or lost, it made him look human, and that humanity is precisely what keeps audiences invested in him beyond the screen. By morning, headlines framed the night in tantalizing questions. Is the ember still warm? Are they writing a new scene without a script? Or was the night proof that two people can share space, history, and silence without reigniting anything but a respectful acknowledgement of what once was? The media loves a resurrection. But it also understands the power of a graceful goodbye. This encounter gave both sides enough to work with, and left the truth suspended just out of reach, where it tends to sparkle the most. Those who followed their rise from setmates to sweethearts remember the arc vividly. The chemistry that caught the public eye, the early sightings, the careful way they navigated attention, the many times they seemed to move as one even while saving themselves from the frenzy of public spectacle. When the end came, it was the kind that leaves no splinters, one of those rare farewells that honors what existed without trying to rewrite it. That's why this new chapter, whether it's a footnote or a preface, feels so charged. It isn't only the possibility of love resumed, it's the memory of love done well, even as it ended. At the event, one more detail stood out. They didn't attempt a staged reunion for the cameras. There was no orchestrated hug, no shared table, no whisper in a corner designed to be leaked. If there were acknowledgments, they lived in glances and the smallest adjustments of posture. That discretion has always been their trademark. It's what made the story believable when it began, and it's what keeps the story dignified now. They guard what matters and let the rest be theater for those who need it. And yet, even as reason argues for restraint, the heart relishes the possibility. The image of him looking toward her, and her answering the room with composure that glowed, will be enough to power a dozen theories. Some say the night only confirmed that both have moved on, fully and kindly, letting affection be memory. Others insist that feelings don't evaporate, they evolve, and sometimes they wait for a setting almost exactly like this one to remind people of what they once found. Both could be right. Or neither. The beauty of such a moment is that no conclusion is required for it to mean something. As the evening wound down, guests began saying their goodbyes, retrieving coats, exchanging last nods. Through the glass at the entrance, the city's lights flickered as if complicit in the whispers. Hazal stepped out first, slipping into the night with the same measured elegance she brought inside. A few minutes later, after enough time had passed to avoid any staged overlap, he followed. The distance between their exits said nothing and everything, depending on who you ask. For some, it was proof of boundaries. For others, it was the careful choreography of two people who know they don't owe anyone a show. Today, the speculation touches not only on their personal story but also on professional possibilities. Could a new project bring them back onto the same call sheet? The industry would welcome it, fans would treat it like a holiday. The talk has already begun in quiet corners where producers keep lists and directors dream about electricity you can't teach. Even if nothing more comes of it, the idea alone feels like a gift in a season hungry for moments that feel real. What remains is a memory of a night when an old story breathed again, not with grand gestures, but with subtleties that speak louder, a fixed gaze, a patient smile, the shared understanding of two people who once walked side by side and now navigate parallel paths. Whether those paths veer closer with time or continue at a respectful distance, the night accomplished something rare. It offered a glimpse without taking anything away. It reminded everyone why they cared. And it did it all without a single quote, a single post, a single staged embrace. We'll keep watching, not to pry, but to see if fate and scheduling, history and timing, choose to cross their lines again. Until then, that Istanbul evening will sit in the collective imagination, humming softly with questions that have no need to be answered right now. And that is sometimes the most compelling chapter of all, the one that ends on a breath rather than a period. That's our story for tonight. If you enjoyed being here with us, make sure to subscribe to Turkish Spotlight Secrets and share this video so more people can join the conversation. We'll be here, watching the lights, listening to the whispers, and bringing you the moments that matter most. Good night from Turkish Spotlight Secrets.